I'll wait for a second to make sure that we're live. This is something we always have with the live events. Great. Okay. Hello, everyone. Thank you for joining us. This is our first joint event between the DSC leads from UK and Ireland. And I can see the stream is working perfect. We have amazing speakers today with us. We have two Googlers actually working in this technology for many years now, and here to talk about Google Cloud with us. And you can just search the name. We have oh my god, yeah, disconnected. Yeah, we have our Rich Rose with us, and we have David Orant with us today. And both are software engineering, work at Google before. So over to you, David. Hopefully. Thank you.
Thanks very much, Hani. It's great to be invited by the DSC leads group. Thank you very much for inviting us. Both Rich and I are very excited to speak to you. Just one quick correction. I'm a Google Developer Group lead. I don't work for Google. Rich does, but I don't. That's why when I was asked to do this talk, I said, hey, do you know who I would love to hear speak from Google? And the first person that came to my mind was the handsome Rich Rose. Very interesting guy. If I could sit back and listen to him talk about technology all day, we would. We've had Rich at various events from DevFest to Dev Party for the last few years. Before he started working for Google, he was a Google Developers Group lead himself from Leeds. So he knows what it's like to be a lead like you guys are in the group. He's answered questions. He's helped a lot of people through a lot of technical issues, and now he works for Google. Rich, are you on the line?
I am. Hello.
Hey, Rich. So it's great to have you, and it's great to be. It's an honor to interview you again. So I think that's the format this is going to take. Is I'll do a quick interview with Rich Rose. He'll tell you a bit about himself, and he's got a bit of a technical presentation prepared for us that I think everyone's going to be interested in. It's on serverless, so I know you guys in college and universities kind of working on your Java, maybe an Android program here or there, and are looking at what's hot in technology right now. You may have come across Kubernetes and some serverless. So this is a look forward to what maybe you'll be working at when you join the workforce and leave university. We're happy to take questions throughout the presentation, but there is a 20-second delay. So if you ask a question, it will take a little while for us to get back to us. So please be specific. Okay, Rich. I suppose where are we going to start? I suppose everybody wants to know what it's like to work for Google. I know you have a very unique story in how you came to work for Google. Would you mind telling us?
I'm not sure I'm not sure the how unique it is. My background, way back when I started off as a developer, I then moved into network security. And then I kind of fell into infrastructure, which is very apt for cloud development. So my background is kind of an odd mix in terms of development, security, lots of nice firewalls and things like that, and then more infrastructure, so building servers and different estates of different types of hosts. So ultimately, as I went through all of that process, I picked up lots of different skills, which have stood me in good stead over time and led me to the point where I actually passed a Google interview. So for me, my background is probably slightly unusual in terms of, I guess, the standard Google. I don't think there was actually a standard person. I don't know. I say standard. I think it's more determined on what you actually want to achieve. So in my area, I work in Google Cloud. You have lots of people who know lots about infrastructure, about building different architectures, putting together different services, and generally just trying to work out how things can be connected within the world effectively, which is pretty much everybody's using everything on the internet these days. So that's basically where we're trying to do.
That's really interesting. Another part of your job, Rich, is to design some training courses, some training materials for
Mm.
people in the outside world, such as the developers groups, both student and the workforce developers groups. What's coming up? What's getting hit a lot in that area now? What lessons are you seeing spikes in?
Um, well, everybody's go-to at the moment is Kubernetes. So that seems to be the flavor of the year. In fact, that's been at the top of the charts. So just to explain what I do on a daily basis. So my job within Google Cloud, I'm a lab architect. So that involves essentially building training content. So if any of you are using a platform like Quick Labs or Coursera or Pluralsight, you'll have seen various hands-on elements. So when you've gone through the talky bit and they ask you to actually get fingers on keyboards and do something and implement something, that element is typically coming out of my team at Google Cloud. So in terms of that, there's a nice ranking that's done on a daily basis of the various technologies that are available on there. And principally, the rankings kind of hit two areas. So if you're on an infrastructure type journey, you'll see lots and lots of Kubernetes, lots and lots of containers, lots and lots of serverless stuff in there. If you're on a data journey, you'll see lots and lots of things around predominantly BigQuery, because that is, it makes data easy to manage and access. If you're on an ML side or AI side, you'll predominantly see things around TensorFlow, PyTorch, some Keras stuff in there as well. And what we try to do in terms of the training team is we try to keep ahead of that curve. So what types of technologies are people interested in? What kinds of things they need to learn in terms of being able to use a particular product? How do you get various products to gel together? So if I want to use, for instance, Kubernetes with serverless, then there's a meeting in the road for that, which is Cloud Run. And that gives you the ability to basically deploy the same artifact on either serverless or Kubernetes. And similar for the other products, you'll find that there is a matching pair associated with various things. So if you want to, for instance, ingest some data, you can use something like cloud storage, and then cloud storage will naturally talk to something like BigQuery or Bigtable, etc. So that's basically what I do.
Good answer, Rich. Very thorough. Just as an aside for all the DSC leads, doing these kind of study sessions using Quick Labs is a great meetup experience. You get to do things with your communities, or even together. You can do them online as well. It feels a great month when you've maybe there's not a lot of content going on. Doing a study lab is always good. Rich and his team do provide access to Quick Labs through the DSC Google Communicator. Who's that person? I don't know. One of you guys will know. And for all the people watching at home, if you can get a chance to do any of these Quick Labs courses, it's fantastic for your overall progression. If in the future you want to take any of the certifications from Google. Now, I took the ACE, that's the kind of hands-on one. And because Rich had given us access to these Quick Labs courses, I was quite used to being in the terminal, in Google Cloud, in person. It's the real one. You just have a segmented area that you can then complete your lab in. And if you have time left over, you can have a little poke around. But it's well worth the time. It's well worth your effort. And if you can get those qualifications, if you get those certifications when you leave college, your job hunt becomes a lot easier. You are something. You're not just a computer scientist. You are a computer scientist that is certified by Google. You'll be snapped up. So that little aside going past there, and that little piece of advice, I suppose what's next? Rich, you have a bit of code for us that you want to run through. Please stop me at any time if you think we're running close to where we should be starting the code area, because
can I just jump in on your certification piece?
Of course.
Absolutely correct. If you are thinking about working in the industry, in IT in general, I highly recommend thinking about getting a certification. The reason I say that is because way back when I started my career, certifications were effectively just like a piece of paper. It was just something you did. But it didn't really hold much weight in terms of going for a job. Nowadays, I think there's a slight difference in terms of the hands-on element now being integrated into the actual exams. So rather than it being a paper exercise and you having to remember lots of things, you're actually having to sit at a keyboard and work through a problem. And to a prospective employer, that's much more valuable because you have effectively demonstrated your knowledge in a particular area and your ability to achieve a particular activity or task. So if you do have the opportunity to do an exam, and I believe the market is actually moving in this direction as well, if you have an exam which is hands-on, that is worth a lot more than a paper exercise because you have effectively demonstrated your skills. And you can see that in a lot of the exams moving in that way, and that's not necessarily just Google. All the main tech companies and certifications are actually doing that. Oh, not you, Google. So if you look at, I think AWS are also moving in this direction. I think Microsoft are already with hands-on labs already. If you do a specialist exam, such as the ultra difficult Kubernetes exam, then that in itself is probably one of the premier, depending on which sector you're in, premier certifications to get. So the Kubernetes exams is, I think they're now 3. One's just been released for security, but historically there's been 2. So there's been one for if you're an application developer and one for if you are going to administer infrastructure. So I do strongly recommend, if you are in the position like David, for Google Cloud, the Associate Cloud Engineer exam is very hands-on. And as you go through that process, you learn a lot about the platform that you wouldn't necessarily get from reading a book. And similar for the other cloud providers, it does teach you a hell of a lot about the platform, which you will find beneficial when you eventually come to guide a lot of the companies who are still working on premises and need to transition their stuff into the cloud. So that's going to be highly helpful to you.
And also, just to note as well to people that are watching, I know this is a Google Students group, so if you're planning to move into Google, well, you'd like to move into Google as a graduate, getting that internship in Google is should be the way you're looking at this. But also remember, going in as a graduate is not the only entry point. You can go and get your experience wherever you want. And then you can look to move once you've proven yourself as a developer or as a project manager or whatever way you're planning on moving in your career. Everybody's different, but don't put pressure on yourself. Do your work, be happy at your work, find something you love to do, and that's good enough. Moving on.
Stop, you keep on coming up with great points.
That's from listening to you too much, Rich. So
just in terms of that, yeah. I know there's a lot of emphasis on, especially when I think back to being at university and thinking about where do I actually want to end up working. please do think long and hard about the type of role you ultimately want to have, because there's a lot to be said about being able to have some enjoyment and pleasure from the work that you do. And if you do have the fortune to be able to get to a position where you really, really enjoy it and you really, really love the work that you do, that in itself will bring its own rewards. But please don't feel like you have to go down a particular route in terms of everybody else is being a developer, or everybody else is being an infrastructure engineer, or everybody else is being a program manager or something like that. There are enough roles across all of these tech companies where you can be true to yourself and try and find something that meets you where you are. And I see this in terms of, so I interview for Google Cloud as well. And the one thing that sings out to me when I interview someone is when you can see the passion for what they actually want to do. And this is a job that they've dreamed of for the majority of their life. And getting to an interview stage is hard enough. So being able to push it through and say, well, actually, the reason I want this job, because you will be asked, why would you want to work at Google? It's a ridiculous question, but it's asked. You have to be truthful to yourself, you know, and you can see that that passion when you're asked that question. You're able to answer it by going, well, actually, you know, when I thought about it and thought of all the options, I see myself in this position because of these reasons. That really speaks volumes in terms of your interview, and that's not applicable just to Google. That's applicable to anywhere, right? You may having seen this session go, you know what, I don't want to work in IT. That's cool. You could go and work in somewhere. Just try and find something that that gives you joy effectively, because your work lifetime is a long time. So you're effectively committing to something for a period of time. So you need to make sure that it is something that you are A, going to enjoy, B, going to do your best at it as well, and C, enable other people to transition to that role as well. Because once you're in that position of power where you've got into the company of your dreams and are doing your dream job, your next task is to pay that forward and enable other people to go down the same path. So that's the one thing I'd take out for that. You know, when you get into a situation where you are the person getting into that awesome role and everybody's really jealous of you, and I just looking to you for advice, give them the best advice possible. Make sure that they have everything they need, and if they do need anything, be there for them, because ultimately that person may be someone who in the future may be able to pay that back to you as well. And it's a circular thing. So always be looking to share and enlighten other people, because that's the way that we're all going to be able to move forward and get to a better position and better roles and enjoy things that we're doing. Because there's nothing worse than being in a role that you don't enjoy. And trust me, I've had loads of roles that I do not enjoy. So just try and remember that going forward.
Yeah, very true, Rich. I was working as a developer in Java, and I was looking at the clock, you know, at 4 o'clock, going, oh, another hour. I've since transitioned into DevOps security, and now I find myself with my wife knocking on the door, going, "Hey, it's dinner time. It's 8 o'clock. You know, you need to come away from it. It'll be still there in the morning." So you will find what piece of this large technology world there is that speaks to you and what you want to do. And then when you get that role, as Rich said, your job is then to make yourself redundant. That's the only way you're moving up, is if you can teach other people to do what you've been doing. then you get to share that knowledge. You get that enormous sense of well-being while still staying technical. Or as a project manager, scrum master, moving into project management, moving up to product owner.
Yeah.
That's your route, whichever one you want. Just make sure you're happy. And like I said, I ended up at Genesys, extremely happy. We work with AWS. A lot of the skills, well, most of the skills from GCP are transferable.
Yeah.
It's an awesome world. Just make sure it's your world. Do what makes you happy, and everybody is different.
Yeah. And you hit the nail on the head again. So in terms of, and this is again my own opinion. Let me preface that. Cloud is cloud. Right? Ultimately, you're going to be using 80% of the time, arbitrary figure, some form of Linux, and that's whether you're on DigitalOcean, Azure, AWS, Google, whoever else. It's pretty much going to be that.
Alibaba Cloud.
Alibaba Cloud.
Yeah.
Who can forget Oracle?
Yeah.
all of the good stuff, right? If you ignore all of that noise, ultimately what you're learning is about managing machines and the connectivity between machines, and adding software onto the machines. That's pretty much the same most places, and the skills are very, very transferable. So whether you're on-premise or in the cloud, if you can build a machine, if you can add software onto that machine, if you can create a network, you can transfer all of that stuff pretty much anywhere. And the same goes for other roles as well. So if you're looking to develop things, I think I can't remember where I was watching something earlier this week, and the sage advice from that was to learn 5 languages in terms of development languages. Not to show off or anything like that. It's to basically give you a rounding of appreciation of development languages and the strengths and weaknesses. So if you're doing something like front-end development, then it gives you options. And options are awesome in our industry, because if you can develop in, say, TypeScript / JavaScript, Python, that gives you a lot of scope. If you go to the back end, if you can do C, C++, Go, it gives you a lot of options. So always be thinking about how you expand your skills, but don't necessarily rest on your laurels in terms of what you have, because ultimately things change over time. Languages change, they come in and out of being the flavor of the month. And the important thing is, once you understand data structures and algorithms, that enables you to transition quite nicely between languages and use them to their best effect. So yeah, I definitely try and get to a point where you're comfortable with at least 5. I'd say 5. Five seems a nice number, nice round number.
Yeah. And I think Rust and Go are the flavor of the month right now. But just remember, guys, stuff as you're still in university, stuff you could spend, stuff that could be your dream job might not even be invented yet. And that's the truth of it. Because I'll tell you something. I work mostly with serverless. That wasn't a thing when I was in university, you know. So, and just to bridge from that point there, from serverless, about 4 years ago, Rich Rose, the man in front of you, came to Galway in Ireland, all the way from Leeds, to do a talk for us at the Google Developers Group. And at the end, someone asked a question, said, "Rich, what do you think is he was like 2 years, I think, in the industry, and he's like, but I feel like I'm not doing what I should be doing. What would you recommend I look at?" And Rich's answer was, have a look at Kubernetes. That's going to be really hot. But I would keep an eye on this thing called serverless. It's just been announced. And where we are now is all Kubernetes. and serverless is moving in. So this man's got a crystal ball when it comes to technology. His finger's on the pulse. I'm going to put you on the spot now, Rich, and I know you can see this coming a mile away. Have you any predictions for us at this point, just before you launch into your code?
So I think this is interesting, because I was listening to a podcast last night which blew my mind. So in the podcast, they were basically.
Do you want to drop a link there for the podcast? Is something we should be listening to too? You can find it later.
It wasn't what I expected in terms of the content. So I can't remember what the podcast is called. Let me look it up. But it was basically, they had a guest on, Neil deGrasse Tyson.
Oh yeah.
And he was explaining some topic, and one of the guests asked him about being able to see into the past. And Neil deGrasse Tyson's explanation of how you could look into the past blew my mind. And it was just like, I did not feel that was possible. So I was not paying attention in physics in school, because it just absolutely blew my mind. So, oh yeah, it's definitely possible, because of the speed of light. You can look into the past, and I was like, what? It was amazing. Anyway, I digress. So I think in terms of if you want to basically move forward in time and predict the future, you basically, especially in IT, it's kind of looking at the trends and where they actually are leading to. So if you went back, I don't know, 5 years or so, Linux implementations were growing. So that I'm talking now about the back-end server world. So where all the web servers and all that good stuff sit. Ignore those the noise about Linux is shrinking in terms of desktops. It might be. I have no way to evidence that, so I will go with the stats. But in terms of servers, it's game over, man. That's what it is. It's Linux on servers. So that came to pass. But with Linux comes a whole host of wonderful stuff. So you get like namespaces and processes and nice threads. And when you have that, someone clever will eventually come along and think, hey, I would like to partition all of this stuff so that it's nice and neat on my machine, rather than having to use a big VM. And containers came to pass. And you got containers. Well, once you have X amount of containers, then you need something to manage that. And again, what came to pass? Something to manage containers, Kubernetes. So there's a nice path in terms of technologies. If you follow the seeds, you can see effectively what's looking to happen. So once you have Kubernetes as a platform, so that everybody's basically using that and then using containers, then you basically move up the stack. And if you move up the stack, then that allows you to do nice things with serverless, because serverless will sit nicely on that Kubernetes stack without you needing to do anything. But then once you get to the serverless part and you implement that, then everything then becomes an API call. And once everything becomes an API call, then you get much better integration across everything. Because then we'll talk about like microservices, having things being small so that it can be managed and changed very, very quickly. But ultimately, from a design, development, architecture perspective, it doesn't really matter. If you can have like a huge monolith and swap it out with another monolith without anybody noticing, why would you break it down into smaller components? It doesn't make any difference. The monolith to microservice thing is more about reliability overall. So for the future trend, you know, if you know how to develop, you're going to be good. If you can develop in multiple languages, you're going to be good. If you know about infrastructure, you're going to need to know less and less about infrastructure, because once it goes into the cloud, that's all abstracted. So you don't need to know that much about it. What you do need to know is how to do the networking, because that's going to be super, super important, because you're constantly going to have every single component you have talking to each other. So if you think about, if you ever seen the Netflix microservice model, that's basically where the world's going to, in terms of having things interconnected, not necessarily in microservices, but having things interconnected. And in doing that, that gives you a very, very powerful platform. But ultimately, what that means going forward is I don't have to worry about whether something's on Windows, whether it's on Mac OS, whether it's on Linux. What I need to worry about is, does this thing talk using web protocols? Because all of my stuff that I create uses web protocols. And that way, I don't need to have a binary compiled for Windows, Mac, Linux. I don't need to worry about that. That's someone else's issue. I just create my app, whatever, whack it in a container, run that container, give it an endpoint, and then let people talk to it. That's where the world's going. So hopefully someone's going to implement some really clever way of making that really, really accessible. But that's to me seems like where everything is going.
Brilliant, very exact answer. You mentioned there that that everything is going to become an API call, which is HTTP protocols, which they're quite slow, to be honest. When you're as calls go. So if you have loads of them going through an entire system, that's going to give you some latency. I know HTTP2 was being designed to strip away some of that or to feed back some more information, but we haven't seen much of it in the industry yet. Do you know anything that's happening around there?
It is.
Aha!
It is. There's so, and this is the interesting thing about the day and age we live in. There are so many things that are abstracted from what we see on a daily basis. So the beautiful thing about having cloud providers is they have their own networks, and internally in their networks, they are upgrading them to faster protocols. So as you say, if you're using HTTP 1.1, it's very, very slow. Go to HTTP 2, quick, adds it on and gives you a better throughput end to end. But all of these things can now be implemented on a decentralized network. So you think about AWS's network, Microsoft's network, Google's network, spanning the entire globe. And if any traffic goes into one of those networks, it zooms across the world in a split second. That's what's speeding up access. And now with Google Fiber, hopefully at some point we'll get it over here in the UK. But things like that are super exciting, because at some point people are going to have ridiculous internet speeds for everything. And you think about how many internet connected devices you have just in your house, it can blow your mind, because all of those things are constantly talking and taking up lots and lots of broadband. So ultimately, I think we will move to newer protocols, but it is something that it is just generally exciting, especially from a networking perspective, because there is some clever technology being implemented.
Brilliant. It's going to be an amazing world. It is an amazing world right now, but it's going to get even faster. As a precursor to you starting the technical part of this talk, you showed us the HTTP book that's there behind you. Is there another book there? And you know which book I'm talking about. I want you to, yeah. Mr. Rich Rose has written a book.
I don't know where mine is. I'm in the middle of, oh, there it is. I'm in the middle of
up a bit.
Available at all good bookshows.
Up a bit. Show us the whole book. Come on now. There's the shameless plug. Hands On Serverless Computing with Google Cloud. If you are interested in serverless at all, it is a great follow along. I would highly recommend it. Rich, I suppose the floor is yours. Will you take us through your I've forgotten the name of the demo.
Small talk.
Small talk. That's it.
So, conscious of time, because I think we wanted to finish in about
10 minutes now. At this point, we've gone on a bit.
And we've talked way too long. So I've cut it down as we were speaking. So in my book, Hands On Serverless, it basically takes you through how to use serverless from a Google Cloud perspective. But just remember that serverless is available for all the cloud providers. So if you have, and hats off to the cloud providers for doing this, they all provide a free tier, and a very generous free tier. So if you haven't already, I would highly recommend that you take advantage of that. So get an account on each of them and utilize it. Just have a play around, have a look and see what's available, how to log in, how to initiate a resource, how to stop a resource. Definitely don't forget to stop a resource when you're using Cloud Kit, and just see the differences between what's provided, because they all have different viewpoints in terms of how to present information. So on Google Cloud, and hopefully this will do this. If I just move that to there. On Google Cloud, the interface is very straightforward, effectively. It basically gives
Google
you...
has this result.
Oh, not you, Google. It basically gives you a front end. So if you're familiar with using anything like a web app, such as like Gdocs or Slides or Sheets or something like that, where you have that interface where all of the good stuff is on the left-hand side, it basically follows that principle. Azure does something similar as well. AWS has a slightly different interface style, so it's got lots of different things embedded on the screen. They're all much of a muchness, to be fair. You will effectively find one that you like or loathe all of them. It doesn't really matter. They give you the same stuff. So if I can, and if one of the administrators can allow me to share my screen.
There you go. You should be able to do it now, hopefully.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me just move that to there. And that to there. Hopefully that can do. Oh, brilliant. Okay. So let's just find what I'm looking for. I think.
Are you sharing screen now?
I'm just trying to find the right screen.
I
think that's the right one.
It's no problem. Just as you're doing that, Rich, both Rich and I are happy to speak to anybody after this call, student, DSC lead, anybody we're quite open to conversation. You can find both of us on LinkedIn. It's Rich Rose on LinkedIn and David Renton. I'm happy to speak to anybody about life in Genesys, DevOps, security, life transitioning from student to developer. As is Rich, he's always been very generous with his time. But we've got to just respect the time it does take to give a proper answer. But like I said, Rich has always been very generous, and we're happy to speak.
Okay, so if I believe you should be able to see that now, although I can't see it, which is cool. So that's good. Can you see that, Dave?
Yes, sir.
Awesome. Okay. So for those of you who haven't seen it before, this is effectively the Google Cloud interface. So as I mentioned, down the left-hand side, you've basically got a list of stuff that you can use. The main things are you've got compute, which is basically your VMs, virtual machines. You can run Kubernetes there. You can run Cloud Functions. Cloud Functions is, again, serverless. You can run Cloud Run, which is serverless again. You can do different storage things. So if you want to host a simple website, a static website, you can use storage to do that without needing to create any additional resources. You can do things like SQL Server, Cloud SQL, all that good stuff. Down to the networky side, you can create networks and connect things to that. That's the fun stuff, I think. There's also other things in here, but the ones that I would particularly point you to, and they've changed the titles again, which is interesting, is the tools section. So this is the developer tools section. So if you're ever learning Google Cloud, do learn the tools that are in this section. And I'm recommending them because they can save you a lot of time. So things like Cloud Build are amazing. So Cloud Build allows you to automate lots and lots of tasks. So if you think about, if any of you use something like Docker and the process of building an image, pushing that image, pulling that image, all of that good stuff, Cloud Build allows you to do that in an automated way. And it will do all the stages for you, so you can configure it in a nice small file, and it will just basically do stuff. If you have something like your files in a Git repository, so GitLab, Bitbucket, GitHub, it can also talk to that, so that when you commit code to that repository, it will also go through a predefined build process for you. So if you say, every time I commit my code, I want to build my new image or artifact, then Cloud Build will automate that process for you. Other things in there are artifact registry. So that's basically just a nice home for things like your images, your Java code, so Maven dependent, I think. If you've got any NPM modules, you can host it in there as well. Identity platform, so you can do multi-factor authentication, which is pretty cool. Yeah, and then there's the rest of them. But Cloud Build for me is the main one. That's the thing that is my go-to if I ever need to automate anything. And it's extensible as well. So if you want to do things like Android builds, if you want to use Terraform or Packer or other tools, you can basically just ask Cloud Build to do that, and it will build it for you. So that's pretty cool. But the thing that I wanted to show you was the serverless side. So in here, if we go to Cloud Functions, we have, if I have pressed the right button, I think I have. have I squeezed that? Ah, I did. Right. So in Cloud Functions, Cloud Functions is basically a piece of serverless technology that's available on Google Cloud. And functions are basically meant to be a small element of code. And by small, I mean effectively one function / method. So do this, and that's it. So it's going to be short-lived and quick to execute. It's very, very useful for what's called event-based processing. So if you have something like, I have, again, sent some information perhaps to storage, that storage will have an event to say, hey, I see some new information, now do something, at which point the Cloud function will be invoked and actually enact your code. So if you have something like, every time I send something to storage, please print out what that file name is, or the timestamp, or something like that. It's very good at stuff like that. As you can see over here, you have different forms of authentication associated with that. So you can have unauthenticated, which basically means it's public access, or you can have it authenticated, which makes it private to a particular audience or domain. In my project here, I basically deployed a couple of Node.js files. So if I just duplicate this, hopefully you can still see that, and then switch to that one, and that one. So if so on my screen now, because I can't see the preview, is that now saying front end Cloud Run?
Yes, sir.
Okay. Just made that a bit bigger. This is delightful. Okay, so another form of serverless available on GCP is something called Cloud Run. And Cloud Run has people quite excited. And the people who are excited are people who use containers. Cloud Run effectively allows you to deploy serverless code as a container. So you can basically package up any application, binary, etc., into a container. And as long as it's available on a web port, so 8080 in the instance of Cloud Run, you can deploy that and have it run and accessible. So Cloud Run can be used for lots and lots of stuff. The most interesting use of this is one I saw yesterday, which is basically allowing you to play a game of chess using SMS, iMessage, and chat, and something else. So as I said earlier, in terms of everything moving to be endpoints and API calls, Cloud Run gives you that facility pre-packaged. So if you can, within your application, have something respond on a particular port, which is 8080, then you can build some quite fancy stuff with that. So the example of that that I have hopefully here is a little application that I whipped up, and it's basically an example of how to integrate Cloud Functions, Cloud Run in a small application. So in this application, if I just refresh it, you basically start with a nice simple form. So the form is basically just HTML, CSS. You can write this in whatever, it doesn't really matter. So what I want it to do is when I put a message in, so let's try hello. When I press the translate me button, what it should do is go off and speak to my Cloud Functions running in the background. And when I do that, it goes off, and you can see through the calls, it'll say in various pieces, processing, and then change to the correct text for that language. So this is basically saying from my, and if I just switch back to here, which is the front end, from this front end, which is Cloud Run, go off and talk to my Cloud Functions. So I have two Cloud Functions here, one for speech, one for text. So it will effectively go and talk to those APIs. Those APIs, once called, will send a response back. That response will be the translation. And then once it's got the translation back, each one of these is an independent invocation of the Cloud Function. So you've got 9 calls to a Cloud Function, and each call says, give me a different language, and then return that information back. And similarly, you can do something fancy with audio. So I haven't enabled that for this demo because it's quite a short demo, but you can enable audio, so it will actually give you the pronunciation of the various things. So when you get to things such as Japanese, which I don't speak, I'd have no idea how to pronounce this. It's quite useful to add that on. So in the full GitHub repo, that's available in there. And again, you can do this under the free tier on Google Cloud, so it's pretty accessible. So that's a whirlwind tour into Smalltalk. You can run this yourself. It's available on a GitHub. I'll send you all the link so you can play with it and change it. Please do change it. Have a play with it, change it, impress me with what you can actually build with it. It doesn't necessarily need to be a translation. It can be anything, really. But it's a nice way to get a range of technologies put together in a simple and extensible way. Okay, so that's Smalltalk, and that's the demo.
Thanks very much, Rich. That's fantastic, and we managed to keep it under an hour. Just to mention, when you're going out into industry, this example may seem a bit, industry's not going to want to translate a word into French. Maybe not. But what they might want you to do is, as things are dropped into an S3 bucket or into a storage bucket somewhere, that you need to do some data processing in that and maybe put get a name, a URL from the name, the size of the object, and enter that into a database for machine learning to be run across it. These are the things that they can be triggered. You can have triggers, like Rich said. It's all responds to events. This is event-driven programming. This serverless world. So when something gets dropped into a bucket, if it's a file or a report from Charlie in Sweden, and you need you need the figures from that report entered into a database, or you need the name of the size, or some manipulation of the name to fit in with your repositories and how things work in whatever company you're working on. This way is really the best way of doing it, because with serverless, while everything runs on a server, what serverless means is you're not paying for uptime. So it runs the same as you would have on a VM, but you're not paying for that VM to be alive and waiting for a call for 24 hours a day, 7 days a week. You're paying for just every 100 milliseconds. Is that right, Rich? You're paying for?
I think it's 100 milliseconds. Yeah.
Yeah, every 100 milliseconds. That's what you're paying for, and there's a limit on that. Or a minimum value on that. So what Rich did there, you saw how quick those returned. So that's what Rich paid for that one invocation of that, instead of having a server awake and listening for connections for, like I said, 24/7. So I hope you can see the value in that. And I highly recommend Rich's book. If it's the one thing you do this year in your off time, pick your way through it, do a few examples, get involved in quick labs, have a look at the serverless world. It's where the employment's going to be. If you enjoy this, you will have a great time. And like Rich said, it translates from AWS to GCP to the Huawei Cloud or Alibaba, wherever you want to go. They're all supporting serverless. It seems to be where life is going to be going in the tech world.
Yeah, definitely. And it's, again, hit the nail on the head. The demo itself, while rather simplistic, is demonstrating a number of techniques. So How do I use storage, so that back-end storage? How do I make it accessible? So the permissions associated with that. How do I interact with APIs? So a good thing to know is how to get various services to speak to each other. So when you get to the point of going for interviews and being able to impress your prospective employer, it's good to have something like this in terms of in your back pocket to say, well, actually, as you get these questions in terms of, oh, well, have you ever implemented an API? Have you ever added some storage? Have you ever done some front-end development? It's good to have these things in your back pocket to be able to pull out and say, well, actually, I can demonstrate that by, if you see this repo that I have, it's got this element in there, and I can demonstrate that step by step how to implement that particular thing and talk you through that process. It's always nice to have something like that, because that's definitely going to be something that's going to impress a prospective employer, so they can see that you've actually gone through that process. They can see your work, they can look through the code, and they can make an assessment. So that's obviously going to be of some benefit.
And start your GitHub, get your GitHub rocking and rolling. I mean, this is your portfolio. Would you hire an artist without seeing some of the work he's done? This is your artist portfolio. You can put up some. I was working on this serverless thing. This works. This version works on GCP. I changed it slightly. I have this version working in AWS, all in the free tier. Just proving that, not proving. Well, you're expressing what you're interested in. You've tried this out. You liked it. You didn't like it. You got something to work. And there's always value in that, just getting something to work. And there's great self-esteem in it too, that you follow this, got it to work, you know a little bit more about it. But do get your GitHub rocking.
If just in terms of examples, there are some fantastic examples, free things on YouTube, just taking you through various programming languages and techniques. So you don't necessarily have to, if you're not into development, you don't necessarily have to start developing. It's just having that portfolio to say, this is the type of stuff that I've done in my spare time. This interested me. I saw it on YouTube. I thought, hey, why not have a go? I went through it, and here's the result. So it gives you a talking piece to build that initial as an icebreaker in the interview. Because there's always going to be a situation, depending on what role you go for, they're always going to have some element of, well, how do you evidence that? So if you go for a developer job, the obvious way to evidence that you can develop is to have a portfolio. It doesn't mean that you have to build the best programs in the world. It's just having some examples to say, you know what, this demonstrates this technique, this demonstrates that technique, and just split it like that. They don't have to be complete programs, but just try and have something available, because that makes you a definite stronger candidate.
Doesn't even have to work, to be honest.
Yeah.
Do you know, I tried this, couldn't get it to work. I plan to go back to it when I have built up more knowledge in that area. But I used good techniques. I used branches and merged to master when I was happy with what was working, things like that. You know, that's what employers are looking at. Is this guy going to be is this guy or girl, going to be a good fit for the team? Do they have some good practices that they can bring with them? And it's just the small stuff. You know, you write tidy code, you left a little message for yourself in case you'd forget what you were doing that time. Actually, look, it's 8 o'clock. We are officially out of time, but we'd like to take some questions if anything have come through. Rich, I think you're still sharing your screen, buddy.
Oh, sorry.
Yeah, of course. We've definitely got some time for questions. We've had a few questions already coming through on the live stream, so I'll pass those across to you. And if anybody else watching live on YouTube has any questions, please put them in the live chat, and we can pass them across to David and Rich. So the first question is, what would you recommend for people that are looking to start their career in cybersecurity?
Is that pen testing, or is that in security like DevOps? It's like, pen testing is a little bit of an odd one. There's not a whole heap of positions, but I know HPE in Ireland do a lot of it. There are certain companies that really do have some pen testing. An awful lot of companies are asked to pen test their own stuff and provide reports to get contracts. That's a thing, but it's not a massive field. It's not an area that you're going to find a lot of jobs in. But I suppose your best thing to do would be looking at some of the free resources, and this is just for pen testing, where they allow you to, they provide websites that you can use attacks on and try and build up your repertoire using bug bounties and stuff like that, where it's permitted, because you shouldn't go after any website or any web service without having that permission, because that's illegal. You can get in big trouble for that. On the security side of it, like for information security, as in automation, making sure that your packages and stuff are up to date, there usually is a DevOps team that will manage that. DevOps security, that's where I am, and most companies will have a DevOps security team. So I suppose getting used to some of the DevOps tools, like Rich would say, get familiar with your Linux commands. Having good Unix commands will always stand you in good stead. And just express an interest, but you do have to develop first. I don't think you don't think anybody really goes straight into security. They usually start as a developer. After 2 years, maybe, when you've kind of earned your stripes, to kind of move across then.
Yeah, definitely. I think security is a really interesting area, because what you tend to find with people who do that for a living is they've started up as other things, and they've built up a portfolio of skills and experience over time. So for things like pen testing, that's a difficult area to get into. But for more general security, you should definitely look into attending a CTF, capture the flag exercise, because that basically gives you an overview of the types of skills that would be useful, and that's can build up through not only development pieces, but actually interrogating systems legally. So that's very, very good and useful to do.
Actually, everybody should have a go at that. It's great fun.
Yeah, it's super fun. It's super fun. Yeah.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much for that answer. The next one is more of a comment, actually. DigitalOcean charged him £30 because he forgot to delete his droplets. So I think, just to echo what you both talked about, to disable your resources when you're not using them is definitely something to take into account.
Yes,
we've got another question asking, if you were to make a new web application today, what would be the key information that you would use, whether to run something on the container or on a serverless function?
So for me, and this is probably, and let me add a bit of background so this doesn't sound odd. So for me, I run everything as a container. So I've switched from a Mac machine years ago to using Chrome OS, and Chrome OS has got progressively better over time, to the point now where I don't use any other operating system apart from when I'm in the cloud, and even then I can use Chrome. So I think, as an exercise, as an intellectual exercise, containerizing applications, again, is super fun, because you suddenly realize how little you know about the application that's running on your machine and what it's actually doing, because recreating that environment can be super difficult for particular applications. Some of them are really easy to containerize because they don't do anything outside the boundaries, whereas others do lots of things and spread files all over your system. So for me, as an intellectual exercise, I would always containerize it. If you just want to write a function and have done, I get that. It's not as much fun, but it is more expedient in terms of getting to where you want to be, especially as a developer. But for me, I would containerize pretty much everything, because then the main benefit I get out of that is because I switch between my local machine and the cloud. So having all of my stuff containerized means that when I'm not at home and I need to use my stuff, I basically have a cloud build function to basically take a snapshot of the container and push it to the cloud. So I've always got the latest version wherever I am. And you will find that depending on how you actually want to work.
I suppose there's one caveat to that. The likes of Lambda in AWS and Cloud Functions in GCP, you wouldn't host a web app there. You host it in a container. That's Cloud Run or Fargate. So because these functions are stored somewhere in AWS, they're stored in S3 buckets. So when you hit that endpoint, it has to go to the S3 bucket, take out the zip file, unzip the file, and run the code before you get a response. People generally flick off websites if they don't get an answer within 4 seconds. You're cutting it tight, trying to do something like that. And there's cold start as well, cold start information versus warm start. Containers get reused as they're built from serverless, like in the strict Cloud Function and Lambda world. But Fargate and Cloud Run, they're actual containers. They'll move a lot quicker. So Cloud Function and Fargate, yes, are Cloud Run and Fargate, yes. Lambda and Cloud Functions, no, for web apps.
Got it. Thank you ever so much for that. Another question is, I think specifically for Rich, as a Googler, do you have unlimited cloud computing and storage, which does seem like everybody's dream?
I don't believe I do. So lie. In terms of, we have like a separate access, if that's what the question's getting at, to the general public, but that has some restrictions applied to it. So we can use all the toys within Google Cloud, but in terms of external traffic, there's a big firewall in between it. So what, and this is something that I tend to do because I work in the training team. In the training team, I get free access to the Quick Labs platform, and the Quick Labs platform has access to GCP, the public version. So I use that more than I use the internal version of Google Cloud. I don't know whether I'm meant to name what it's actually called internally, so I'm just going to avoid calling it. Yeah, I tend to use more the Quick Labs platform, especially if I need something like a web app where it needs traffic coming to it, because it's just generally easier. And it doesn't need multi-factor authentication applied to it.
And you don't have to worry about turning it off again.
Oh yeah, because it's sandboxed and timed, so yeah, it'll just end after a period of time. Yeah.
Well, that's always rather helpful. Thank you very much for that. We'll get Google's trade secrets from you another time, Rich. And another question was asking whether a stacked GitHub would be more valuable for employers or having a lot of certificates in terms of technicality. So whether we should be putting our efforts into building up a big GitHub portfolio or putting our efforts into getting a lot of certifications, I think is what the question's getting at.
I think it depends what the certificate is. Something like something like the CKA, Certified Kubernetes Administrator, is worth its weight in gold. So if you've got that, then most employers will bite your hand off because there aren't that many people who have that. But if you're going for something like a development role, there's nothing better than having a strong portfolio in your repository and being able to talk through that code and the challenges associated with that. So one fundamental thing that people tend not to do, and I see this so many times in terms of when people have awesome code in their repo, but they don't put any documentation in there. So a prospective employer isn't necessarily going to run through every single line of code. What they're looking at is, well, actually, have you explained what this is doing? So I can like go through and go, oh, that's interesting. Let me have a look at the code. They're not going to spend time going through every single file you have in your repo. You need to make it easier for them. So one of the things that I have in my private repo is an example of this. And it's where I do training courses. So I have every single training course that I've done, and it's basically indexed. And within it, you can basically link to other repos, and it gives you an overview of everything. And it's super, super useful. And having done that, now I'm thinking about structuring the rest of my repo into exactly the same thing, but have a public version. Because I feel like whenever you anybody has anything to share, and there's tons of quality code on GitHub, tons of absolute garbage as well in terms of code, nice balance. But the quality code, you really need to complement that with having some decent documentation for it, which explains what it is, why it's useful, and how you went about developing it. And then you're good, because anybody coming into that can be suitably impressed. Hopefully that answered the question.
Yes, it very much has. Thank you. David, if you wanted to weigh in on that at all, as any of your experience as well would be really insightful.
I think that it depends on the person you are. Like I said, technology is different for everyone. Different people prefer different roles between front end, back end, DevOps, security. There's a massive amount of roles, and with that brings a massive amount of different personalities. So if you're the kind of guy who I just want to sit, I want to code, I'm going to do this, I really enjoy this, I'm going to put it on GitHub, and that's me. Fine, that's you. You're still making yourself better. You're still making yourself more attractive to employers. If you're the kind of guy who goes, I know I can do a lot of these things. I know I can do it really well. I'm going to go and go and take the certifications. Do that, but you will do stuff over the course of a certification that you could go, oh, I'll just try this out. And as you try it out, you just make a repo and just push it, and you're done. So you're kind of going to do both along the way. And if you're going to build up a big repository, you're going to learn some tips and tricks. You go, maybe I'll take the certification. They'll all go hand in hand. And I know it seems an awful lot as students now, it seems like we're saying an awful lot of things that you're going to have to go and do. We don't mean you have to do them all right now. You guys have a lot to do studying, and we know how difficult it is. We've all been there. Don't forget that when you're working in a development team, it is a team effort. No one fails by themselves. It's the team that will fail or succeed. So when you're tackling something, do ask questions. Do reach out to other people. And you guys, the leads, have each other as developer group leads. You're in connection with the Google developers group leads, who are in turn in connection with some of the Googlers and people who are very, very senior developers. Don't be afraid to ask for help. We all ask for help all the time. A lot of my code comes from Stack Overflow. Yeah. That's life. That's the life of a developer. There's nothing to be ashamed of that. We all look for information. We can't know everything. And to be honest, most of the mistakes I make are simple mistakes that I just can't be bothered to remember because I can look it up.
Yeah, because I use GitHub in exactly that way. So I have lots of stuff that I find I struggle to remember because I use it infrequently. So I have like little gists that I've added on just on certain things. But where I need a more complete example, I actually go through the process of doing an exercise to walk through that bit by bit to remind me. One of the things that I can never ever remember how to do is a service account, but it is fundamental to using cloud to know how to use a service account. So having that repo available is super helpful to me, and it could be anything. Put what helps you to remember how to do particular things, and things that are repeatable as well. that you use constantly but cannot remember how to do. And everybody has something like that.
Just one more thing on that subject. Having a good GitHub is free. Taking a certification isn't. So if that's a factor while you're in your younger career, look at the GitHub repo first. Then maybe you get into a good job that they're going to mind you, look after you, mind your career progression. They'll probably pay for your certification then. So you don't need to jump out and go at it right now. If you have the extra money, by all means, go for it. You will be snapped up straight away.
Yeah, and do when you're looking for certifications, go online and ask people, is this worth the money? Is this worth doing? Don't just take it. Do check, because the certifications change. So things like the CKA, the CCNPs of the world, definitely the pro level certifications, they're all worth their weight in gold. But there are other things that people may say, oh, you should get this first or that first. Ultimately, that's not going to get you anything additional. It's just going to demonstrate that you've learned a particular thing. So do investigate the certification properly before you invest in it, because it is an investment. It's an investment in you when you take a certification.
It's worth its weight, though.
Yeah.
When you're looking for promotions, you can turn around and say, well, I've taken this certification. Even the professional services side of companies, when they want to be Google affiliated, they need to have developers within the team that have the professional certifications taken, and they check. You have to supply these names. So professional services need people to have taken these certifications and provable, and they're renewed every 2 years. So that's where it becomes, that's the bit I think I was missing when I was thinking about certifications, was that, am I just showing off for me? It's not just that. Well, you are showing off for you, but companies need to have a certain amount of developers that have taken these certifications to become Google compliant.
Lovely. Thank you ever so much for answering everybody's questions and for talking. I'd like to wrap up by saying an absolute huge thank you to Rich Rose and David Renton for a really enlightening dive into not only Google Cloud, but also, well, life as a computer scientist. It can seem like a rather daunting journey for a lot of us as students. So your insights have been incredibly, incredibly helpful. Particularly your advice regarding certification to help us progress our careers, and just how passionately you've talked about finding kind of the right career path for us. It has been really, really helpful. So thank you ever so much for that, Rich and David. And I'd also like to say thank you to everybody that's come to watch. This is our first collaboration between Google DSCs across the UK and Ireland. We have another event this Saturday, also on the topic of Google Cloud Platform, with a Google developer expert. So please stay tuned if you would like to see more events like this, where we can get more excellent speakers, just like we've had today. David and Rich, you have been absolutely incredible. So thank you so much. I will end the live stream there, and I look forward to seeing you at any future events. Thank you so much.
Cool. Thanks.